just excited. How many of y'all were touched by the Lord last week when God was just pouring out His Spirit mightily? Yes. Amen. Well, today we've had a real motivational series coming off the Living Like a King. Then we had 10 reasons why you need more of the Holy Spirit. But today we're starting a sermon series called Answering Objections to Supernatural Christianity. And I want to preface by this, that we're not speaking against any brother or sister in the Lord. We love them, we honor them, but we want to be confident in what we believe. And as we look into the scriptures, particularly next week, there's some things that I can really see where they're coming from, and I can see how they can interpret the scriptures that way. However, I have experienced the Holy Spirit, and I've seen His role in the scriptures, and I believe that He deserves a bigger role. And even whatever is happening here, we want to give the Holy Spirit a bigger role. I also believe that as God begins to pour out His Spirit in the church, that there's going to be people that ask questions and say, why do you believe this? What is the answer for this? How do you deal with this issue? And I want to equip you to have some answers. I don't want you to shy away and say, I don't know what to say. No, I want you to know that we're on the biblical high ground and that we're going to, we have good answers for what we believe and the reasons that we believe. So let's pray. Father, I just ask that your presence and your power is going to move in this place today. Touch us by your grace and by your glory. Fill us with your power. In Jesus' name, amen. I was awakened to supernatural Christianity from the very beginning. I was baptized in the Holy Spirit with power. I spoke in tongues and I trembled under the power of God. There were times I felt like electricity was flowing through my body. I could feel fire all over me. And I immediately began to have the ability to spend time in God's presence and to spend time with Him. And I just loved being in His presence. And His power would come down so strong for a season of my life. So many times I was on the floor of my room in a fetal position, just having the power of God moving through my body. And during that time, God gave me a concern for the lost and the people that didn't know Jesus. And me and some of the kids in our youth group at the time, we decided that we would go to downtown Greenville and we would start witnessing, and we began to learn that if we prayed for people, they were a lot more open than us just going, you need Jesus, you need to get the sin out of your life, whatnot. But if we prayed for healing, if we had a word from the Lord that would open up something, and they were more receptive to the gospel. But I also quickly learned that the people that were the most opposed to us praying for the sick on the streets and giving a word were other Christians. And I learned that in the Bible Belt, there are a lot of people that believe the Bible, but were opposed to supernatural Christianity. Some people even said that if you speak in tongues or if you get a word of knowledge, that it's because you're demon-possessed or you're getting that information from demons. And growing up in the Bible Belt, I've seen many Spirit-filled believers who are intimidated to share the things of the Spirit with other believers. They're like, I don't think I'm weird. I don't know what they'll say about this. I just don't have, just prefer they not know. But what we're going to do today and over the next 2 weeks is we're going to answer some of these objections. And we're going to equip you so you're not intimidated. Because I've got good news for you. We're on the scriptural high ground. And next week, we're going to look at scriptural objections. The week after that, we're going to look at theological objections. But today, we're going to look at cultural objections. So most people, their response to supernatural Christianity is cultural, not necessarily biblical. So let's get started. So cultural objection number one. God would never do anything weird. He's a God of order. Now this line of thinking usually revolves around manifestations. People shaking, twitching, people falling down, people speaking in other languages. And the line of thinking usually goes like this. That looks really weird. This makes me uncomfortable. The Bible teaches that edification and encouragement should happen in the church. I'm not edified because I'm freaked out. Therefore, this is not of God. Sometimes the line of thinking is, if God's attempting to draw people to himself, then he would never do anything weird. Sometimes people go, this looks really weird. I hope it doesn't happen to me. I really hope it doesn't happen to my kids. So it can't be God. But let's answer these objections. The problem is a big false assumption. And the false assumption is this: God is like me. You see, we might not realize this, but Paul taught that this assumption, this idea that God is like me, is the empowering lie of idolatry and false religion. In Romans chapter 1, verses 18, 22, and 23, it says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Skip to 22. Although they claim to be wise, they become fools and exchange the glory of the immortal God for images to look like mortal human beings and birds, animals, and reptiles. Paul starts off by saying that the people suppress the truth and that the truth about God is evident in creation. And how they do this is they exchange the truth about God for the image of man. Idolatry begins with a person saying, God looks like me, God thinks like me, God acts like me. And we naturally view God through the lens of ourselves. In a full-blown fashion, this leads to false religion. But in lesser degrees, we all fight this. But the reality is God is not like us. He is above us. He is beyond us. In all ways, he's different than us because he's infinite in power and knowledge and presence. You see, the God that created every variety of person and culture is not going to be just like you. I've got all kinds of pictures here. Just scroll through them as fast as you can. Look at all these different people, different cultures. These people were thought up in the mind of God before they ever manifested on the earth. Look at the diversity of culture, the diversity of people. Just keep going. And how diverse humanity is. And the reality is, when we say, you know what, God, you're just like me. The rest of the world doesn't show that. God is a whole lot different than you. And the reality is most cultures and most people are a whole lot different than you. You see, God is not like us. In the Western church, we act like God's some dorky white guy that would only wear duck head trousers and a button-up shirt. And if he comes in the room and he doesn't meet our expectation, then that's not God. Let me tell you something. The God that made all the variety in the universe, the God that made people completely different than us, is not like you. And when you begin to be convinced that God is like me, this is how God works, this is how God thinks, this is how God acts, then you are mistaken. And that is the basis of idolatry. You see, the other concept and the other problem with this line of thinking is the concept of weird. Say weird. You see, weird is anything that you haven't been exposed to. Weird is based on familiarity. So if you go to an African nation and they have a disc in their lip, let's pull that picture up here. Okay, we go, you know what, that's weird. But that's not weird to them. They're used to it. Now, if you showed them a pair of underwear, let's pull that up here. And you said, we wear this around our waist, they would think, man, those folks are weird. Man, that's crazy. You see, weird is based on familiarity. What's normal? What we're familiar with. It's weird because we're not familiar with it. It's weird because we don't know what it is. So let me tell you something. When you start seeking an all-knowing, everywhere present, all-powerful God who is totally different than you, then you're bound to come across some things that you're not familiar with, which is obviously going to mean this seems weird. You see, as a matter of fact, we're all unfamiliar with him, with most of him. And we're going to spend all of eternity learning who he is, learning the vastness of who God is. I also want to make a clarifying statement. I'm not talking about weird for the sake of weird. There are many times socially awkward people will enter into a spirit-filled church or in the spirit-filled movement, and they see things that are weird, and they assume that weird is a sign of spirituality. And they're like, you know what, I'm already awkward. I can do this. And it reinforces the awkwardness of what they already have. I want to say this, that we're not here saying, you know what, you should be dysfunctional. What we're talking about is that you are being exposed to a God that is far beyond anything that you ever imagined, that you've ever known, that you've ever experienced, who's far bigger than you've ever been. You see, many times when you get serious about seeking God, you will have an encounter that challenges you. And what God's saying is, he's saying, okay, you want to set the parameters for the relationship? Let me tell you something. I'm the one that's going to be worshiped, and you're the one that's going to do the worshiping. And you don't set the parameters to the relationship. I do. You adjust to me. And he will not allow us, if we are genuinely seeking him, to recreate him in our image. You want to be in control of the relationship? God says, all right, you want to be in control? Here's one drop of my power. Boom! How does it feel on the floor? God says, you want to be in control of the relationship? Here's one drop of my power. Boom! How's it feel to be twitching like that? You see, God's not like you. And if you are genuinely seeking the true God, not the one that you want to create, not the dorky white guy that comes in with the trousers and the button-up shirt, but the genuine God that is spirit, that is truth, that is the creator of all things, that all things diverse and all things unified have originated in his mind. When you begin to seek him, you will come across some things that you think is unusual. Because you don't get to set the parameters for the relationship. He's the God. He sets the parameters. You do the worshiping. And he's the God that receives the worship. And if you're serious about him, then remove your preconceived ideas about him. Open your heart and seek him. And give him permission and say, Lord, touch me in any way that you see fit. I lay down my preconceived ideas. If you're God, if you're big, if you're awesome, touch me. Jesus, one of the things that Jesus did, there's a blind guy. Couldn't see. What did he do? He spit in the ground. Then he spit in the ground, he got some of the spit and he made mud. And he stuck the mud in the blind guy's eyes. And the guy wasn't immediately healed. He said, oh, you got to go to this pool and go wash off. And when you go to this pool and wash off, then you'll be healed. I don't know about you, but I think that's kind of weird. I think that if I did that on a Sunday morning, there would probably be some folks that left the church. I'm just saying. The reality is God will bring you to the place that will crush your pride so you can seek him. And he will crush your pride in the scriptures. He will crush your pride through experience. He will crush your pride through correction. He'll do it. I remember when I was at Southeastern, we had spiritual emphasis week. It's kind of like a week of revival. We'd have services in the morning and services at night. And I remember I was there. And I was worshiping, I'm an enthusiastic worshiper. Some of y'all have seen that. And there was this lady that shouted behind me. And when she did, I don't know what happened, but something got on my feet. Like, I don't know. My friends were laughing at me. They were balled over laughing. My legs were moving so fast. They were going up and down. They were going in every direction. I was dancing like something on steroids, I looked like whatever happened. And I got off like, man, what was that? What was that was God saying, you know what, you want to be in control of the relationship? No, you don't define this. I do. You're genuinely seeking me. Let me break the power of idolatry in your life. I'm not made in your image. I am God. Cultural objection number 2 is it's not real. It's nothing but emotionalism. How many of you have heard folks say that? Now, this argument is made up of 2 components. The first component is it's not real. The second component is that emotions are inferior to logic. Now, let's break this down. The statement that says it's not real comes down to your view of Scripture. However, this argument is made both by atheists and believers. Now, if you don't believe the Bible, if you don't believe that Jesus rose from the grave, you don't believe in angels, you don't believe in miracles, you don't believe in demons, then obviously you're not a Christian. But there are answers to those objections. There are things that I could preach about that would answer those objections, but that's not this series. Okay? We're talking to believers here. And the reality is many believers will say that just as much as an atheist will. They'll say, that's not real. That was just emotions. The question to a believer then is, do you believe the Bible? Do you believe the Bible? You say, you don't believe healing is for today. I like to look at the book of Acts. Because the book of Acts is after Jesus has died, ascended into heaven. And it's the church. It's the age in which we live. What does the Bible say in the book of Acts? You don't believe healing's for today? Acts 5:16. The crowds gathered from the towns around Jerusalem, bringing their sick and those tormented by impure spirits, and all of them were healed. Amen. That's what the book of Acts says. You don't believe God speaks today. Okay, Acts 9:10-14 says, in Damascus, there was a disciple named Ananias. The Lord called him in a vision Yes, Lord, he answered. The Lord told him, go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul. He is praying. In a vision, he has seen a man named Ananias. That's you. Come to the place, lay his hands on him, and restore his sight. Lord, Ananias answered, I have heard many reports about this man and all the harm he has done to your holy people in Jerusalem. And he has come here with the authority from the chief priest to arrest all who call on your name. The Lord spoke to him so clearly that he argued with God about what God said. God spoke in the New Testament. You don't believe there's New Testament prophets. Well, Acts chapter 11, verses 27 through 28 says this. During this time, some prophets came down from Jerusalem to Antioch. One of them was named Agabus and stood up and through the Spirit predicted that a severe famine would spread over the entire Roman world. You don't believe we cast out demons, but Acts 8:7 says, for with shrieks, impure spirits came out of many, and many who were paralyzed or lame were healed. You don't believe that angels appear to people today. Acts 12:15 says, you're out of your mind, they told her. When she kept insisting that it was so, they said, it must just be his angel. That she was saying, Peter's out of jail. And they're saying, girl, you're crazy. It's probably just his angel. They were so, seeing angels was so commonplace in the early church, they said, you know, you didn't really see a real person. You really just saw an angel. Also, you don't believe that God speaks in dreams and visions? Acts 2:7. In the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. You look at them and say, do you believe the Bible? We'll say, well, what about outside the book of Acts? Okay, you don't believe that tongues is a supernatural language? At 1 Corinthians 14:2. For anyone who speaks in a tongue does not speak to people, but to God. Indeed, no one understands them. They utter mysteries by the Spirit. Well, I don't think you should do it in the church. 1 Corinthians 14:39. Do not forbid speaking in tongues. Can it get any clearer than that? Well, what did Jesus say about it? Well, I'll tell you what Jesus said about it. In Mark 16, 17, and 18, these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes with their hands, and they will drink deadly poison, and it will not hurt them. They will place their hands on sick people, and they will get well. That's what Jesus had to say about it. And I can go on for hours like this. The question is, do you believe the Bible? The Bible says it's real. And if you want to be a fruitful believer, then you cannot side against the Bible. The next idea deals with the emotions. The assumption is the emotions are inferior to the intellect. Now, it's true they have different functions, but one is not inferior to the other. In Mark 12:30, it says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The heart and soul speaks of your spirit and emotions. Your strength speaks of your body. Your mind speaks of your intellect. In other words, God is saying, love me with every part of your life. Every part of your life was given for the purpose of loving God. God gave you your mind to experience God in your thoughts and in your thinking. God gave you your spirit to experience God in your spirit, and now you can connect with Him. God gave you your body to experience Him with your body and to work for Him and to serve Him with your body, and God gave you your emotions to connect to God with. And when you have an emotional experience with God, then you're using your emotions in the way that God intended them to be used. it's the highest purpose of your emotions. Many people that see emotions have prejudice against them and say, that's fake. Well, I say they have an unbiblical disdain for emotions. Our culture has made an idol out of intellect. God wants you to be intellectual. He wants you to be intelligent, but He also wants you to excel in your spirit and in your emotions, and He expects you to excel physically. He expects you to be mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually fit. You see, the Holy Spirit longs to develop you in every way. And many of us, we have some well-meaning brothers and sisters in the Lord that will tell you that your experience is not real because of emotions. And you need to tell them, I have a biblical view of emotions. I have a biblical view of the supernatural. God gave us the emotions to glorify Him and to experience Him. The Bible is clear about that. And what you can do is just flip it on them. Say, well, you know what? You need to decide if you would need to be closer to God and more effective for Him by believing His Word and engaging your emotions. You know what? I can pray for you right now that you would have a biblical worldview and that God can touch you in your emotions right now. You see, you don't have to be on the defensive. God's Word is clear. When you answer the objections, flip it on them. I remember when the Sunday that Brandon got healed, he was praying and he was just crying and crying and crying and crying and crying. And I was thinking, man, I hope the emotions don't mess things up. But the reality is, even I have those thoughts sometimes. But it was in those moments that God touched his liver. And you don't get new livers by psychosomatic reactions. You get new livers when God does miracles. Cultural objection number 2 is abuses are too prevalent and too damaging to seek spiritual gifts. Their argument is spiritual gifts do more harm than good. Here's how you answer that. You say, you know what? Abuses are prevalent, and they're also damaging, just like they were in the Bible. That's why Paul wrote 1 Corinthians 12, 13, and 14 to correct abuses by spiritual gifts that were taking place in the church. There will be abuses of spiritual gifts. There will be times that people are overly emotional, but don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. The proof is in the pudding. Does the Bible teach it? Then you need to believe it. And I'm going to tell you, the Spirit-filled movement, the charismatic movement, is one of the greatest movements in the history of the world. Pew Research in 2006 did a study. Said Pentecostals make up 1 in 4 Christians across the world. There's a total of 500 million people worldwide that claim to be Pentecostal. If you add charismatics to that group, people that believe that the other gifts of the Spirit are signs of the baptism in the Holy Spirit, rather than just speaking in tongues, then it increases even larger. In Brazil, Guatemala, and Kenya, 50% of the population actively claims to speak in tongues. This is Pew Research. This is not me making this up. In the United States, 23% of the population claim to be Pentecostal or charismatic. I'm not talking 23% of Christians. I'm talking 23% of the United States population. Brazil, 49%. Chile, 30%. Guatemala, 60%. Kenya, 56%. Nigeria, 26%. South Africa, 34%. The Philippines, 44%. South Korea, 11%. And India, 5% of the population claims to be Spirit-filled believers. Harvard has a whole college that studies Pentecostals and charismatics. And Harvard claims that the Spirit-filled Pentecostal movement that started in 1900 is the greatest movement in the history of the world. Let me tell you something. We cannot give up the baby with the bathwater. Yes, there will be abuses. Yes, there will be things that go wrong. Yes, there will be people that are learning. And do abuses hurt people? Yes. But the movement of the Spirit is the most powerful movement on earth, and we're to embrace it because we want everything that God has for us, and you want everything that God has for you. I long for you to experience more than Christianity light. Christianity light is not going to keep the next generation. I desire for you to have something real. I desire for you to have something worth sacrificing for. I desire to give you something that's worth dying for. Something that would send you to the nations of the world with a smile on your face, knowing that you're right in the middle of the will of God. I was in Brazil with Global Awakening, and I was with we were in some of the smaller churches, and a smaller church there is, 1,000 and below. And we were in a church of 300 to 500, and this was all young adults. Everybody was probably between 20 and 30. I mean, this was a very young congregation. And my team leader called us to the front, and he said, I just want you to go through just laying hands on people and praying for people. And the Spirit of God came not just on me, but on the whole team of about 20 of us altar workers. And we went through about 300 to 500 people in literally about 30 seconds. As fast as I could run, laying hands on people. As soon as we would touch them, they were hitting the ground. So before we could even get our hand on them, they were falling on top of each other. They were flopping like fish. I mean, there was just people on top of people on top of people. And then we turned around, and then, they were just the craziest thing you've ever seen. And then all of a sudden, spontaneously, every single one of those people, they jumped to their feet and they started dancing with all of their heart and with the greatest joy that you'd ever seen in your life. And then my team leader said, come back through and pray for them again. And we went through the same thing again, and they all went down again. You see, these moments are moments of joy. And they're moments where the presence of God was so tangible and so real, is so overpowering, that you look back and you think, man, that is one of the greatest moments of my life. And I don't want to come up here week after week and give you a sterile form of Christianity, a watered-down version, because our culture is not comfortable with that. I want to give you the real deal, the biblical Christianity that opens up everything to you and lets you know that there is more out there. And we're not going to clean this up for religious people. If God wants it messy, we'll let it be messy. But the reality is, I want to bring you to the place that says, I want God no matter what. No matter what.